Hello there, my name's Gina Gardiner, and I'd like to welcome you to this series, Taking the BS Out of, and today we're going to be talking about small business leadership. Now, it's a challenge being a small business leader. I know I am a business leader and I've worked with many business leaders, and I recognize there's all sorts of BS that gets in the way. I mean, one of the things I quite commonly say to my clients is, my bullshit meter is jangling. It doesn't actually matter if people try to BS me. What's really important is if they try and BS themselves. And there are so many things that people try and make excuses. They sabotage themselves from any chance of success because the BS gets in the way. And I want to bust some of those myths that are getting in the way. I hear so often, it's the economy. What can you do? I can't succeed. The economy is really, really difficult at the moment. Well, the economy is really, really difficult at the moment. And if your starting point is, what can you do? I'm going to fail. Well, that'll become your reality. But interestingly, more millionaires are made during times of depression than there are of boom. And it's because those people who are open to the possibilities of doing things differently give themselves the best opportunity for success. And so if your starting point is, well, what can you do? I'm going to fail. It's a done deal. Whereas if you see it as an opportunity, well, everybody else is holding onto their bootstraps and they're not engaging with looking at things creatively, then you can give yourself the advantage over your competitors. One of the other BS strands that people do is that they'll start to undercut their competitor. They'll think, if I'm the cheapest, then people will buy me. Well, they may for a while, but once you get into that cutthroat, I'll be cheaper than you game, in the end, everybody cuts their throats. So the important thing is, what is it that makes you and your company, your product or your service stand out? And you make much of that, because even when times are difficult, having a reputation for giving high quality, not being the cheapest, but being the best, making sure that your customer service is great, making sure that the quality of what you do is amazing, is much more likely to give you lasting success than being the cheapest. Another really common BS that I hear is, well, if only you could get the staff, if only staff worked harder, if only. When the reality is that the BS in that is that you are the one who chose them, you are the one who trains them, you are the one who deals with them day on day. And so rather than starting and pointing the finger outside, it's really time to have a look at you. Because to lead others, you first have to lead yourself. And I've worked with so many companies where that's been their view when I started working with them. And yet, when they recognized that they were the key to success, not only for themselves, but for their staff, then things began to change. And in order to do that, you first have to manage yourself and ask yourself the question when things are going wrong, how is it that I've contributed? So have you appointed the right staff? Does your advert, for example, identify what sort of staff you need? Do you interview effectively and not just listen to the answers already preparing the next question, but drilling deep? Are they going to fit into your team? Do you want a yes person or somebody who's creative and who's going to be a great team member? Because they're very different skills and attributes. But if you want people who are creative and great team members, you've got to give them space to be creative and you've got to be a great team leader. It's no good you being hail fellow well met one day and being draconian and grumpy the next day. You need to manage your emotional state and you need to be very clear about what you expect from your staff, and you expect on the most difficult day rather than on your good day. And how are you communicating that? Because so many people, well, the BS is, well, I told them, so they should know. Well, anybody who's got teenage children, and let's face it, staff very often behave like teenage children, if not toddlers, that just because you've told them does not mean that they've heard it, internalized it, understood it, and are prepared to do it. And so setting the expectation has to be a two-way conversation. It's why we've got two ears and one mouth, because just because you have said it doesn't mean that they've heard it and taken it on board. And so have you been clear about your expectations to your staff? Have they got ownership of your vision? Because if they haven't, how on earth can you expect them to help you deliver whatever it is? And let's think about the BS around money. So many organizations that I've worked with have a problem with money, and yet they don't know their figures. They don't know their cash flow. They are not very careful about making sure that people pay their bills. I'll give you an example. I was working with a dental laboratory, and they were not getting paid by some of their dentists. Incidentally, these were the same dentists that didn't conform to the criteria laid out not by the dental lab, but by the government in terms of the prescription. And so we talked about, in the first instance, reissuing terms and conditions and making it very clear that anybody that didn't pay up in time, work would cease until they had paid. Now, if you want to hit people, you hit them in their pockets. And so if the lab didn't continue with the work, then the dentist would have patients who would not pay them until they'd got their implants or their crowns or their dentures. And so I want you to think about your general practice of how you do things. Have you got terms and conditions? Do you get people to sign them? And if people don't comply, what do you do? Now, some organizations pay for an insurance company to chase their debt, but whatever you do, it's important that you ensure that your clients pay. I want to share with you a conversation I had with a client who was a construction business. And one of the things that they did is that they had contracts with a whole range of estate agents to go and do their repairs. And a couple of them were not paying, and they were not paying big time, so much so that the company, when I first started working with them, were in trouble because their cash flow meant that they were struggling to pay their operatives, their skilled workers. And when I said to them, well, do you not think it's time to give them a warning and then to say, unless you pay, we're not doing any more work? The client was frightened that if they did that, they'd lose the client. And I pointed out to them that actually that worry had a great deal of BS in it, because the clients weren't paying. They, at the moment, were being a charity. They were doing the work, not getting paid. They were paying the workers, they were paying for materials, but they weren't getting paid. And so often there is the case where there is such a mismatch between what you think you're doing and the outcome. I was working with a wood floor company, and when we looked at the figures, they were doing repairs across London, often taking 3 hours to travel, and only charging a minimal amount for the call out. Added to that, when it was not one of their floors that they were refurbishing or repairing, they often found that the work took far longer and was much more complex than they ever had thought it was, because the job hadn't been done properly in the first place. And so when I put these things in front of them, they realized how for a number of years they had been living by BS. The BS that we need to take every job, because if we don't, we won't be profitable. In fact, the opposite was true. They weren't profitable because they were taking these small jobs at great distance. And so we changed things. First change, they only repaired floors that they had been put in and refurbished them. And they'd been in business for 30 years. So many of these floors needed refurbishment, not because they'd done a bad job, but because they were simply aging and they needed taken care of. Any job in London, they started to charge time and transport costs. And these days with emission charges and congestion charges, it's really important that any work involves those surcharges, because you have to pay those before you can make a profit. We also started to look at how they costed their work. And they were one of those companies that in the first instance, they had tried undercutting their competitors. And it was real suicide. When I looked at the quality of the work and their reputation, they had no need to be the cheapest because the quality of their work was second to none. They took a pride in their work. Not only that, all of their operatives were great with customers. And so part of their marketing was, we're not the cheapest, but if you employ us to lay your floor, we will find the most quality goods, the most quality wood and finish. We will do a great job. We will clean up after ourselves. We will arrive on time, with the caveat that that if we're traveling into London, there may be a delay, but we'll keep you informed. And we will do exactly what has been agreed on your contract. And you can know that if there is a problem, we'll come back and put it right. What a sea change. Within a year, they were so much more profitable. The work was more enjoyable, that they had recognized that in order to thrive, they needed to be very honest with themselves and cut out the BS. So, what BS are you using to keep you playing small? Are you blaming the economy? Are you blaming your staff? Are you blaming the fact that you need to undercut everybody else? Because ultimately, if you want to succeed in business, particularly succeed over time, the one thing you need is a very efficient BS meter. And you need to measure your decisions, your thinking against your BS meter. Is this the truth for my business, or am I kidding myself? Am I taking the easy option, or am I thinking this through? Am I allowing myself to be creative, to be a solution finder, rather than find myself in the middle of the problem with no way out? Because ultimately, you are the arbiter of your success or not. If you think you'll fail, well, it's a done deal. If you think you might fail, you're going to make very different decisions than if you believe I will succeed. Does that mean you need to know every detail of how you're going to succeed? No, it doesn't. All you need to do is to know you will succeed, and that you're going to learn to fail better on the way. And by fail better on the way, what I mean is that you're going to learn when something happens. The first question is, what's the lesson I can learn from this? How can I do things even better in the future? How can I learn to do this in a different way that will give me an even better result? Einstein's definition of madness, one of my favorite quotes, is to keep doing the same things and expect a different result. And yet that's probably one of the most common BSs that we all engage in, because we try harder, more frequently, more often than not. It leads to exactly the same result. And so if you want to succeed, the one thing I would suggest you do is create and maintain the most effective BS meter that you can. And not only for yourself, but also when you're listening to staff, to prospective clients and customers, when you're listening to politicians and people who are making the decisions. Allow yourself the courtesy of truly listening to your genuine inner wisdom. What's it telling you? If it's too good to be true, well, chances are it is. If it feels heavy, if it doesn't feel right, then ask yourself what's going on. Does it mean you don't do it? Well, it probably means it's better to do it in a different way. But start to trust your BS meter. Test it out with small things and then test it out with bigger things. I'd like to invite you to a one-day VIP day where we can work on your BS, if you like, your business, and you can go away with a strategic plan that will help you not only with your newly created BS meter, but also help you find strategies that will help your business thrive and go on from strength to strength. So if you're interested, you will find all of the details in the description, or you can email me at gina@genuinely-u.com. BS is one of those things that keeps us stuck. Bullshit, when you step in it, it smells, it's difficult to clean off. And that's true whether it's a cow pat in a field or it's your own bullshit when you are trying to lead your business. You can succeed even though life is tricky. You just need to make sure that you are not BSing yourself, and you're certainly not trying to BS other people. Thanks for listening. Take care now, and I look forward to hearing from you.